This episode is supported by Trustonomy, an original podcast from OneTrust. Every good relationship you have, personal or business, it involves trust. But we all know that trust doesn't just happen, right? We've all lost trust in a friend or a brand or a product. Trustonomy is a new podcast that looks at true stories from the past to understand how trust works and what makes it stronger and how to rebuild it when it's broken. Now, you know, I'm a sucker for a good podcast that weaves historical stories and relates it to what's happening today. So I thoroughly enjoyed this Trustonomy episode and recommend that you check it out as well. Search for Trustonomy in your podcast player. We'll also include a link in the show notes. Many thanks to the OneTrust team for their support.
Welcome to the Rocketship podcast. I'm Matt Goldman.
And I'm Joelle Steiniger. Today we talk with Flo Motlik, the co-founder and CTO of Codeship. Matt, what do you think about this one?
It was super timely for me and probably for anyone that's building out a dev team at an early stage startup. We learned all about how they've grown their team and managed to keep everyone focused along the way. We talked about, points at which it makes sense to hire different management roles, how to keep everyone going down the right path and accountable. It was really great, and if you're building a team, you're going to love it. We're so happy to have Customer.io supporting the show again. We use Customer.io for Hookfeed, and we absolutely love the power it gives us. Customer.io is a data-driven email platform that helps you communicate better with your customers. The kicker is that their powerful rules-based targeting enables you to keep your messages human, even as you automate them and scale. Go to customer.io/rocketship to start sending emails that convert. So Flo, tell us about Codeship.
Yes. Hey, and thanks for having me. So Codeship is a continuous integration, continuous delivery service. We've been around for quite a while. Have been working with many different companies and have learned a lot from them about their needs, about testing and deployment. And yeah, it's always fun to hear more stories, hear more needs that people have and help them to build better software and basically be more productive. I think that's what we're really after. What we want is that software really touches every life, every company out there. So we want people to be able to build better software faster, really.
So you guys you started off in Techstars. We've interviewed some of the other founders. You guys were a sponsor of the show, and we use Codeship for Rocketship and also Hookfeed. What are some of the growing pains that you guys have had in the past year or so?
Totally, yeah. So we've grown our team from 8 people in last June to over 20 full-time employees now, and then I think another 10 freelancers now. So just making sure that everybody's properly onboarded, that everything works out fine, everybody follows the same vision, follows the same trajectory that we take as a company was just a lot of pain. And I think that's from organizational team stuff to technology, how we make sure that when we add a lot of those new hires were engineers, like how can we get them in and get them started as quickly as possible. All that kind of stuff was really an interesting challenge, is still an interesting challenge, I think, for many teams out there, and definitely was one for us.
So you mentioned that you have a lot of freelancers that you're working with. Is that the typical onboarding? Do you start off with sample projects and then move towards a full-time hire?
Not necessarily. That can happen. It's not necessarily in that way. I think some of the freelancers are engineers, some are like in other areas where we don't want to hire full-time right now. And we definitely hope to hire some of them full-time in the longer term. I think it's also sometimes when we have a specific need of we need to get this done very quickly. And we know somebody like some Rails stuff or some like front-end stuff where we just need a short-term person on there. That's where we talk to friends, talk to people that we've worked with in the past who are great freelancers to get them into the project. Get them going, get a couple of things done quickly, and then walk separate ways for a while, and then maybe a couple months later do something else. And I think it's also something where, because we can build the connection to the freelancers, that over time we're able to just to pull them in longer term. I think a lot of freelancers really like being freelancers, and it takes a while to convince them that it actually makes sense to join another company. And I think that's also something that we're definitely thinking about and want to do and work with them.
So when it comes to making full-time hires, you talked about the difficulty of onboarding people into the team and into Codeship's way of thinking. How did you guys develop a process around that when you didn't have experience before this with hiring?
Yeah, totally. I think that, one of the key things that we did in general to get that experience into the team was hiring our VP of engineering in the fall of last year. So that certainly helped. But in general, like what we try to do with our onboarding, specifically on the engineering side, and obviously that's where our product itself comes in for us as well, is really have every process nailed down so that when a new person comes in, they don't have to know all the details and intricacies of every process that we have, because that's well hidden behind a service, a tool, or something else, that they can come on board, get productive very quickly, and then over time can learn whatever they need to learn on that specific part of the infrastructure, so that they can, like, on their first day, deploy new changes to their DNS or to our main application or to whatever, basically without having to really think about like how does that work in the backend or with any other service, like how does support work, like that they can just very easily get into intercom and do support work and all this kind of stuff to get really started very quickly. And we thought a lot about like what the right onboarding process is there. And we just onboarded a new engineer, for example, who works for us in Austin. And he was really happy with the onboarding process because we really, like, we have long checklists for everything to make sure that on day one, like, everything is done and he is able to be productive as quickly as possible. Because I think the onboarding process really defines the success of that person in the team. Because if you don't nail the onboarding process and you don't have everything set on day one, they are not really that happy. And also their teammates feel that person might not be as productive. So like the immediate feeling in the beginning is for that person is they feel kind of frustrated, and the other team members feel like that person isn't getting enough done or isn't getting as much done as we expect that person to be. What the real problem is, though, that the process aren't good enough. That just is a lot of pain if you don't invest. And I've seen many teams that just didn't invest enough time to like how to think that through, like what the onboarding process is, like how to add to services, make sure they have access to everything, where it's more an ad hoc process. And that's just really, really painful. And I've gone through that myself in the past, and it's just really painful and frustrating if you have to go through that without feeling that like somebody really sat down and really thought this through very carefully.
Totally. And it's hard to put yourself in the shoes of a new person when you're so deep in the company. But when you think about what it feels like for them coming in, it really kind of puts it all in perspective of what you would want and expect out of a company when you're coming on.
Yes, definitely. I think that's something that we've started to do and that really helped us as well, is really make it very clear to the people that join us that like the onboarding process is also something that they have to feedback. Like that's the first feedback task that they have in their job, is like give us feedback on day one, like immediately on the onboarding process, like what can we do better, which information would you need, what is frustrating, what didn't get as fast, and like really ask them the whole time until they like kind of get annoyed by all these questions of like, how can we improve this? Because I think it's also, it sets the example of how we want to be as a company, where like everything, like you should rethink things, you should rethink processes. And like if that starts, like that example is set with the onboarding process on day one, basically, I think that sets a great example of how we want to operate in the longer term.
Yeah, totally. So you talk a lot about productivity, specifically within the engineering team. Can you get some specific on maybe some of the unique challenges that you face, or what you even mean by, staying productive in some of the things that you're trying to solve?
Sure. Yeah, totally. So I think we're now at a time where basically, software touches everything, or software also, as the saying there, software eats the world. And from Netflix to Amazon to Uber and all the other small companies. So software really has to be done by every company. And most companies at some point will have a very strong software aspect, even if the software itself isn't their product. So that's something that just we will have to do a lot more and a lot better software in the future. On the other side, and I think that pretty much every company experiences that, it's really, really hard to hire great software engineers and to really get the best people and really be able to like build all the software that we need to build. So on the one hand, we need a lot more of them. There just aren't enough for many different reasons. One among them is not a lot of diversity in the ecosystem as well. And then also, like, there's so many smaller teams challenging like the little bigger startups now, that like there's so much competition in every field, like in every company now, because everybody can do a lot more with software today. That it's really hard to get everything done when you don't have the right amount of people and enough people. And so I think that's where you really have to get the most out of your team, the most out of your, especially developers, because they're especially hard to find, and really make sure that they can focus on building your product first and foremost. They shouldn't have to focus on any kind of site infrastructure, or like in our case test infrastructure, but there's many other examples, like maintaining their own like project management system. Like that's just something, there's so many systems out there in the world that can do that for you, and all these other like small things that just take a lot of time away from your engineering team, especially in like smaller engineering teams where like the software development and the IT team is kind of still the same, and the software team also manages some of the like maybe WordPress or something like that. And that's just a huge waste of time. And I think focusing on productivity there, getting processes in place, getting continuous integration and deployment in place, and just really making sure that even in your production infrastructure, you have something that you can exchange all the time immediately. Docker is a really interesting technology there. Building an immutable infrastructure that allows you to automate a lot of your systems, a lot of your infrastructure as well. I think that's a lot of points that I've been talking about in the past, and many have. And I think that are really really needed to be able to compete in the market, because I like the motto that Netflix basically has, is that speed wins the marketplace. And like if they build, like they'd rather build something fast and try it than try to be perfect. And I think that works from a small scale to a very large scale, and really needs to happen for many different teams.
This episode is brought to you by Miro. Whether it's agile planning, Scrum events, or technical diagramming, Miro is built for engineering workflows like yours. Enable your team to plan, align, and execute on your infrastructure initiatives all in one single place. That means you can plan your infrastructure efforts with intuitive project management and agile-focused features directly on a Miro board. Miro also has a ton of integrations like with Jira and Azure and Rally, so you can import tasks as native cards so you can see the big picture. Plus, Miro's estimation app gives you clear understanding of work scope and lets you identify gaps in analysis or understanding and set clear expectations for delivery, which is priceless. So, your first 3 Miro boards are free forever when you sign up. So go to Miro.com/podcast. That's Miro.com/podcast.
So do you have a way of kind of measuring productivity, or, you mentioned before, you're always looking for ways to improve things and improve your processes. So do you have a way of kind of, keeping your finger on the pulse of how the team is doing and where there's opportunities for them to do better?
So I think it's really hard in some ways to measure, like to have an exact number of the productivity there. I think that's on the one hand, giving everybody on the team the ability and like being open to them to rethink like all the processes that we have, and also when there's any kind of pain point. I think that if anybody on the team feels like that's not really productive enough, or like that feels kind of strange or wrong, to be able to immediately go up to like other people in the team, bring it up, be able to bring new tools and new systems and new services in, and just try it. And then also really thinking about all the steps, all the work, all the stuff and that people need to do, and just look if there's a service out there, like somebody else that you can give money to do that without you having to do it. I think that's some of the shortcut. Like the best way to optimize a task is to let somebody else do it, and I think that's something that we really, especially as in a startup, that we really think is very very important, and many startups don't take enough advantage, I think, of that. And we certainly did. Fell into the same trap in the beginning, where we optimized some of our infrastructure, we optimized some of the things just for being as cheap as possible. But then really takes a lot of time away from your product, from your work. And I think then when really going over, and so weekly one-on-ones are something that I like a lot there, because you really have to talk through, like, okay, what have I been doing the last week? Like, what were my results? What I have been getting at? And if it seems like there was a lot of stuff that happened that wasn't really meaningful and that didn't really do any kind of, didn't have a huge impact, I think that really shows that you need to further analyze, like, where are you spending your time, and can we just let somebody else do that? And it's probably much cheaper if just somebody else or some other service that can scale to many thousands of people does this for you.
And you do those every week with everyone?
Yeah, so basically everybody does one-on-one with their manager once a week. And then I additionally also do, like, with different like marketing lead or like other people one-on-one regularly, just to talk about our progress together, like how we can work together as well. But yeah, every engineer talks to Jim, our VP of engineering, once a week at least. And then everybody who reports to Mo, our CEO, for example, has a one-on-one each week. And I think that really helps with also, especially self-assessment. I think it's less of a thing where, like, the manager should tell them, like, you didn't get enough done, but I think it's a lot about self-assessment and having this, like, we use a lot of what's it called, where you put your tasks in each day, and I done this. We use a lot of I done this, where you also put in, like, what have you been accomplishing all day, just to really, like, be able to self-assess, like, where do I spend my time and what do I do all day, and where can I get more productive, or what can I let somebody else or outsource to somebody else do. I think that really helps, and also engineers, because I think it's so easy as an engineer to just get down a rabbit hole and just lose track of time for a while, and then be stuck on something that actually isn't that big of an issue anyway for the team or the product, or maybe there's another way or another service, or, like, basically being able to kind of throw money at the problem. And I think, but it's too easy to see everything as an engineering challenge. And so I think that's definitely something where I and we really try to help each other and give each other feedback. Then that if we see somebody getting stuck on I done this on the same task day after day, to ask and help them, like, okay, is there some other solution? Is there something where we can outsource it somewhere, or like a much simpler way that we don't have to spend that much time on this? Or is this really like a huge core product challenge that we need to solve right now?
So I done this keeps everyone on track daily. The one-on-ones keep everyone on track weekly. How do you guys set the bigger picture vision and strategy and communicate that with the team to make sure that you're staying on track?
Yeah, so we really like team buildings on a twice a year. That's really for the longer term view of, like, where do we want to go, and have everybody in the room. And then in the different teams, so for example, the engineering team has a call every 3 weeks where we just talk about, like, our engineering processes, what we can improve there, new things that we should try, new processes that we should try, so that everybody is able to get in, like, what's the vision for, like, how we work as an engineering team. And then we have regularly, basically, when we, for, like, the new product, for example, that we are currently, that we have in beta, and the new infrastructure, we did every couple of weeks, basically, where the team came together and discussed, like, next steps, what is necessary and what we need to do around that. But yeah, especially those team buildings where we really talk less about just the product, but really also how we work together really well and set us up for the next steps for growth. I think that's something that we did in the summer of last year, like right before we hired a lot more people. That really helped us a lot to onboard everybody after that. And the same with the team building this February. That really helped us with a new product and really discuss the direction that we need to go and why it's important, and get everybody on the same page.
So hopefully this is, relatively fresh in your mind, but you've grown the team a lot over the past couple of years. If you could look back to when it was just a few developers, or, one or two developers, if you were doing this again, would you do it the same way in terms of structure on the development team?
No. I mean, there's many different lessons learned. I think one of the main things that I understand a lot better now is how valuable an hour of time is compared to a little bit of money. I think that's something that, especially in the beginning, we've put so much time in just optimizing for very small amounts of money that we could all easily cover. And we spend so much time instead of focusing on the product and getting it out there to customers, really. I think a lot of in the beginning, we should have done more automation, I think. So we've done quite a bit. I mean, since like our product is basically automation for build and for developers. I think we've gotten pretty far on that, but I think we could have done even more, especially around automating your infrastructure, that it heals itself, basically checking for specific variables in your infrastructure and making sure that if those occur, just kill that part of the infrastructure and replace it with something new, because then you can actually stop thinking about these parts. And I think that's something where I want the development team to be as focused on the product itself and not on anything else. And the more people, the more they have to think about, like, is this thing working? Is it not working? Might something be failing? Might we have something that we don't really know anything about? So really making sure that from the beginning we have enough metrics in place, enough operations, and just enough automation that we don't have to think about that at all, and we don't have to spend any cycles on this at all anymore. I think, and bringing that into the team from the beginning instead of setting that expectation earlier that, like, we want to automate absolutely everything away, just so we can really focus on the product and really focus on making sure we build the best thing instead of having to worry about some of the other things that come with software. I think that would be a huge difference from the beginning. I think then also in terms of structure, I think the one-on-one structure, we've implemented it a little later. I think I would have done those a lot earlier now, and really just sit down with the people and discuss, like, what are their problems and where do they want to go. We've completely stopped doing any stand-ups about 6 or 9 months ago, which is, I think, a very good thing. So we're using I Done This now, and for some projects, like the new infrastructure that we're building, we're doing like a weekly stand-up between, like, marketing, product, engineering, and other different parts, and where it's all about what are you going to work on next, and what are you blocked by. I think that's something that's a very different format than what we've used for stand-ups, and I think most people use for stand-ups as well, where it's a lot about, like, what have you gotten done over, like, the last week or the last day or something, which we just capture in I Done This, and everybody can read it in I Done This. But it's not really that interesting what has happened. The more interesting part is what's going to happen. What is the next thing that you're working on, and what are the problems? And I found this format to be very quick and very painless and incredibly helpful. So that's something that one of our engineers brought in a couple of months ago. And I found it to be very nice. A lot better than the typical stand-up format of, like, tell us what you've done the last couple of days. And because then that often ends with half of the team already knows that this happened, half of the team doesn't know but doesn't really care. But having it stored in I Done This, we can look it up anyway, and people get an email every day anyway, and can take a look at that.
So looking at specifically development and setting ops aside, how do you know the times when you need to add a layer of management to the team? Let's say you get to 3 developers. What do you start to notice where you need either a senior developer, or if you need to make the jump and pull in a VP or C-level? How do you know when you need those things?
Yeah, I think especially if you plan to grow your team a lot over time. So I think if you have a team that can grow very slowly, and so they get to know each other, and like the same 3 people are going to work for the same year, maybe don't need a lead. Like, maybe it just works out and they can report to CTO or CEO directly, depending on how that works. But I think as soon as you're setting yourself up for fast growth, getting some leadership early, and maybe having too much leadership, or like potentially too much leadership people in the team early makes sense. Definitely did for us, because that really prepares you for all that is going to happen as soon as you hire a lot more people. I think if you plan to hire a lot in the future, just get some of that leadership in place, and get some of the people that know how to lead people in place early. I think at least made for us a lot of sense, and made growing a lot easier with just experienced people on that. And I think in general, Once communication really becomes an issue where things aren't clear anymore, people are not really aware throughout the company, like what's going to happen, because the engineering team itself has the feeling they don't really know who the one person is that they should be talking to. I think that as soon as that happens, and like some of them talk to a CEO more, some of them talk to the CTO more, then that really becomes a strong issue. And in many cases, like for example with us, is where like me and Mo are very outward facing in many ways. And so that's where we saw the need for somebody who really can take care and take charge of the whole team early on. And I think those
when you have a VP and a CTO, what is the role of the CTO? What does it become? Is it more a product role, or do you have someone else that's focused on, product strategy and then development executes on that?
Yeah, so for us, it's very much, and for my role specifically, it's very much a mix of marketing, sales, product, engineering, although not a direct engineering role. I think it's where I see the role of CTO going, if you're not leading the engineering team specifically, is more basically supporting all other different functions of the company. Like you're supporting the product guy, like in our case, that's Alex, with just information about like where's the infrastructure, like where's our internal infrastructure going, but also like where's the whole ecosystem going, like what's the new things that are coming up, like the whole Docker ecosystem and what's developing there. And then like on the marketing side, like you help them with content, you help them with like ideas or reviewing ideas for like how to attract new customers. And then on the sales side, like you meet, especially as a developer product, like I just meet with a lot of teams and talk about their problems, talk about their issues, talk how Codeship can help them with their specifics. On the engineering side, like talking with Jim about like engineering strategy, hiring, processes that we need to do or should change in the future, just so like he has a sounding board as well that isn't directly in the team. So I think that, and yeah, with Mo, same thing with Mo as a CEO, like a lot of discussions around funding, marketing, company direction, company culture. I think that you're at least from what I've seen, and I've talked to a couple of other CTOs who've gone through the same thing, where it's really like you're supporting all different functions of the team. And like at some point there will be a VP of sales, and then you have to do less sales, and it's like somebody else takes over that role. I think you're moving out of those different roles over time, but until then you're just helping to fill the holes basically that are there in the company until those holes can be filled.
That's great. It's great to learn about. Just to wrap up, Docker is something new that I haven't had time to really dig into and learn about. Can you tell us a bit about what it is and what Codeship is working on with it?
Yeah, sure. So generally, Docker is a container management software, container management layer. What that basically means is that it gives you very fast and cheap virtualization. And that means that you can basically get the most out of your server. So if you take a server and you run one application on it, it might just need only like 30% of that server. So you don't use the whole thing. And that's where like about 10 years ago, Google built containers where you can basically say, okay, instead of running one application on that server, I run 3 applications and I isolate them in separate containers, which means I can now get to like 100% utilization of the server. Without the different applications impacting each other, or they can be totally different, like languages, or like completely different in many ways, have different dependencies. So that's what's basically as an idea behind utilizing as much of your resources as possible. And in the past, it was really only available to like the sizes of Google or Facebook, who all run on that kind of infrastructure. But Docker took the container technology and just made it very easily accessible to any kind of size team. And so what Docker provides now is a very easy format to package your application and run it isolated in on different servers, different infrastructures. And a lot of hosting providers have picked up on that and support this kind of Docker packaging format. So you can build a Docker container somewhere on your local machine or on Codeship in the future, and then push it out into many different providers, into Amazon, and run it there. And the nice thing, since Docker, like the same Docker runs on my local development machine and runs in CI and runs in production, you have like something that very much resembles each other, running on all of these systems. So you have, like, because this cheap virtualization layer makes it possible for you to run the same thing across all those instances. You can build something on your local developer machine and you can push it into production, and you can trust that it's exactly the same thing that you've built locally. And now they're building a lot of different tools, and that whole ecosystem is building a lot of different tools how to make Docker and containers easier to deploy and easier to manage. And yeah, what we've built and what we've been working on over the last couple of months is really a way to use containers and Docker specifically to make it easier for you to set up a complex test infrastructure. So yeah, Codeship is, we do continuous integration as a service. So basically we run all of your build for you, and we want you to be able to be as specific as possible in how you set up your test infrastructure. And with that cheap virtualization layer that Docker provides, basically you just give us a config file that says use this language or this version of the language here as a base image, and then use this exact version of Postgres and this exact version of MongoDB and this other version of this other tool for setting up the test infrastructure. We just stand that up for you and then run your tests against that. And the nice thing there is that going forward, you can be very specific about like that you have the same versions in test as in production. And you can also then, because we give you a tool that you can run the same build on your developer machine, you can run the same build on your local, as a local developer, on your local machine, as you would run on our service, which means that you can really trust whatever build and whatever test infrastructure you're running, that it's the same locally, it's the same on our service, and it's the same in production. So you can be sure that whatever you build and whatever you test is really going to work out in production very well.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Can you let everyone know where they can keep up with you and Codeship online?
Yes. So you can just check out my Twitter at Florian Motlik, and follow us on Codeship at Codeship, and yeah, check out Codeship at codeship.com.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Flo.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Rocketship podcast. If you enjoyed it, we have tons of other awesome episodes on our website. Check them out, rocketship.fm.
And be sure to check out our app discount section, where we have discounts on products that we use every day, like Woo Themes, Wistia, Treehouse. Go to rocketship.fm/essentials and get your discounts today.
Are you looking for a podcast that'll make you laugh?
You came to the wrong place.
That's not us.
That's not us.
Well, it is. We are a husband and wife who chat about raw, real relationship topics.
Like sex.
Like money.
Like marriage and kids.
But we're not afraid to talk about how your newborn baby probably isn't as cute as you think it is.
If you're in need of entertainment while you're driving to work, because that sucks, we can join you in the suckage, kind of like being in your ear.
Not physically.
So if you want to laugh,
Come check us out.
Brought to you by the Laughing Couple Podcast.
I'm Dr. Ray Wingrant, wildlife ecologist and host of the award-winning podcast Going Wild, produced by Nature on PBS. In the brand new season of Going Wild, we're tackling the big question, how can humans look at our relationship to nature differently? And with the help of special guests like Christian Cooper, host of Nat Geo's Extraordinary Birder, and Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, co-creator of the How to Save a Planet podcast. Follow Going Wild with Dr. Ray Wingrant on your favorite podcast app.